Hi, today I thought I'd do a discussion about my Reeve Sebenza 31 Large Sebenza 31 and talk about how I went from being someone that literally would tell people, yeah, the Sebenza and Reeve knives just don't interest me, to now having two of them. I have both the large and the small 31 Sebenza now. And so this is where, if you're a long-time Reeve Sebenza knife user, you can go ahead and say, yeah, I told you so. And if you bought a 21, for instance, years ago, and you paid $350 to $400 for it, unless you lost one of the washers, or you bent the lock bar to the point that the knife won't even lock anymore, or unlock for that matter, right? Then you haven't lost money. In fact, in this market, you probably made some money. So you made a sound investment, it seems. But what about the rest of us that don't know if we should get a Sebenza, but we're thinking about it, right? Like me, I spend a lot of time thinking. So if you're like me and you're spending a lot of time thinking, do I really need this knife? Is it really worth the price? Is there actual enough value in this knife to justify that? Well, I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to answer that question for you, because I actually don't believe that anyone is qualified to tell you as an individual where to place value in material items, at least for sure in material items. Also, I'm not going to tell you how to spend your hard-earned money. That's not my place. But I'm going to go over the knife and how I went from not wanting one to now having two of them, and what I plan to do with them, or the purpose for them at least, right? So go ahead and get this out of the way. I'll tell you what I paid for them, because that's what everybody wants to know, right? At time of this video, I paid, and they're both the same. They're both, and I might have mentioned this, but they're both bog oak handle inlays, bead blasted titanium scales, MagnaCut blade steel drop point blade with the gold anodized single-sided thumb stud, and the barrel spacer where the lanyard goes over it. So I paid, at time of this video at least, subjects change, right, with the market, I paid $575 for the small, and I paid $650 for the large. I think they show up as less on the Reeve site, but the problem is there's like a 4 to 7 year wait to get these off of the site if you order them off the site. So the retailers are pretty much able to charge whatever people will pay for them. So that's the going price right now. Actually, is the best prices that I found while I was looking of anyone that had these in stock. So I got the small first, and I've been carrying this every day for my general EDC knife. And EDC stuff is opening packages, maybe shaving the coating off of a wire if I'm rewiring the motion detectors outside, which I use this for actually, which is why I brought it up. Work around the garden, opening bags of fertilizer or whatever for my wife's latest gardening project that I end up being the gardener for. That's what I bought, and that's what I'm using this knife for. And I have to say, I do really like it for that. And I find that it doesn't scare people off if I'm sitting somewhere and pull this out and cut slices of an apple up or whatever for lunch. So that's what I've been using this knife for. But I've always kind of been a larger knife person when I'm in the woods, either hunting or backpacking or whatever. I've always been kind of a larger knife person. I think that larger knives have a little bit more utility with the longer blade, and along with the longer blade, obviously comes a larger grip, so you get a better grip on the knife, more leverage, right? So let's go ahead and compare these knives as far as the sizes go to each other, and some of the other knives that I took out for this comparison. So you'll see, as far as the blade, as far as the length of the handle goes, the handle length is vastly different, not only in width here, but also in height. There's a decent amount of difference there. This rides really well in my pocket in a pair of jeans or cargo shorts in the summer, right? And this rides pretty good in my hunting pants that has like a dedicated knife pocket to them, right? So that it's also, if you look at them here, they're also wider across the back. So this is a thicker knife as well, but as far as I can see at least, the blade stock on these two knives looks the same. So neither one of these blades is thicker than the other. The large might be a little thicker, a little further out, but towards the end. But as far as the actual stock, they look the same to me. If they're different, it's really minor. They both have hollow grinds, so they're relatively slicey. I wouldn't say they're as slicey as, let's say, a Spyderco or something with a paramilitary 2 or a para 3 with a full flat ground, but they're relatively slicey. I have had no problems with this knife, at least, cutting open packages, opening up the bags for salt for the water softener, or bags of fertilizer and soil and stuff that I'm using outside for the projects that we have going on around the house. No problem whatsoever with this knife, and I've been able to bring it back to being pretty much razor sharp again just by stropping it. So I'm not sure, I'm new to MagnaCut, so I can't say how easy this is to sharpen overall, but because I haven't really had to resharpen this yet, but it strops right up real quick, or real easy. The blades, as far as the blade length, the large is 3.6 inches, I think, and the small is 2.9 inches. So if you're trying to make this determination and you can only have one, check your local knife laws. If you're in a place where you have to have a knife that's under 3 inches, then the small is the obvious knife for you. But if you could get a larger knife, then maybe you might want to consider, and you like larger knives, maybe you might want to consider the larger Sebenza. So let's go ahead and give some other size comparisons. So here's the Microtech SOCOM Elite. And if you look, the blade on the SOCOM Elite is pretty close. It's a little larger, but pretty close to the large Sebenza blade. I think this is a 4-inch blade. This is 3.6 or something like that. So it's pretty close. The blade shape is also relatively close. Differences here are, I think I bought this for $350 or something like that, 300 bucks. The difference here is that this knife is on bearings. So if you're outside and you get a lot, and it's real drop shut action, whoops, misfire, real easy to deploy. The difference here is the bearings, and I feel like if you're outside somewhere and you get something in these bearings, you might end up with a really gritty knife until you can clean it, and I'm not sure that taking this knife apart is okay with the warranty from Microtech. But I do like this knife. I just think that if I know I'm going to get it dirty and I know I'm going to get stuff in it, that's one of the benefits, I would say, of the Sebenza. They actually want you to take this knife apart. It's real easy to take apart, goes back together real easy, and when you put it back together, it's automatically blade centering is back the same way it was before. The blade action is the same. This knife is not flippy like the MagnaCut. This is more of a slow roll, one-handed kind of a knife, but there is a comparison here in how they deploy. This isn't a straight up deployment. This you kind of got to go out and around. That's really the same deployment mechanism, or the same deployment motion here. You don't go up with the MagnaCut either. You have to go out and around, and it opens up. So they both open kind of the same way. And when I first got this knife, I remember just crushing my thumbnail from opening and closing it so much, because this is kind of a fidget, can be fidgeted with, whereas I don't really fidget with the Sebenza. Pretty much just use these knives for what they're meant for, to do things. So other size comparisons would be, let's do the mini freak and the large freak from Benchmade. So this is the mini freak, and this one is S90V, and you can see that the blade length on that is pretty close to the blade length on the small Sebenza, although this blade is taller. And then the Super Freak, or whatever they call it, an M4, with the red barrel spacers and inside, M4 blade. This is pretty close to the large Sebenza. So these are very comparable both in handle size and in blade length to the large and the small Sebenza. And then two more knives. They're kind of assisted or automatic. This is and I think this one's discontinued, but this is the 20th anniversary ProTech Tactical Response knife. That is a little smaller. So if you've seen this knife, the handle's about the same as the large Sebenza. The blade is a little smaller. And then here's the Benchmade Barrage. This was, I think, a special edition Barrage. This is also discontinued. This is in M390, and this is assisted. Whoop, it's got a lock on the back of it. So this is discontinued as well, but I figured I'd break out some discontinued knives. This blade is the same size pretty much as the large Sebenza. So those are good comparisons as far as the size goes. So what do I plan? Why did I get them both? So I got the large Sebenza specifically to carry in the woods. I find that there's more utility to a larger blade, and I find that there is better grip on this handle. So if I'm actually having to do more cutting tasks, right, than just the occasional pull your knife out, cut something and put it back, this is more comfortable in my hand, and my hand fits this much better than this. My hand kind of covers the whole thing up, and I have a little bit of a hot spot on the clip on the small one if I use it too long, where I don't really here due to the fact that the handle is just bigger, feels my hand better. So right now I know there are two comments being made in the comments. One is, I would never spend that much money on a pocket knife. And okay, that's your personal values being placed on somebody else, and I understand that. You don't need to. You can easily do a lot of the same cutting chores that I'm going to do with these knives with a much less expensive knife. So I get it. So you don't have to spend this much on a pocket knife. And the other comment is Chris Reeve Sebenzas are the best knives in the world, and if you use anything, if you don't use a Sebenza, then you don't know knives. Well, that's also probably not true either. I will say that there's no argument that I can make that justifies the price of this knife for just a cutting tool alone. But I collect knives and use them. I'm not just a collector, I actually use them. Although I do have knives that just sit in the safe that I don't ever really use, but these are not two of those. So if you want to buy a higher end carry knife or a higher end EDC knife that you can actually use without worrying about messing it up in the dirt and mud, and this is probably one of the better knives that you can do that with. Like I said, the SOCOM Elite is a great knife, a great larger knife, but I'd be really worried about getting deer hair in the SOCOM Elite, or potting soil dirt in the SOCOM Elite and having it become scratchy and mess the bearings up. So that's one of the reasons that I don't carry this knife if I know I'm going to do something super dirty. Whereas this, you can actually use this knife. So while I can't tell you if the value is there, that's a personal decision, and either way you go, if you get it, if you do get this knife, you'll probably love it, because you can it's not only a really nice knife, feels really good, opens and closes great, good lockup. I mean, this knife is darn near perfect actually, right? Except for the price. You'll probably love it, but you don't need to get this knife, so I'm not going to tell anybody that. If I had to pick between the two in my jurisdiction and what I do with it, and I could only have one of these, I would get the large, because, and I might get the large, if I could only have one, I wouldn't spend the extra money on the inlays. I'm not sure that's necessary. That's not necessary. I just got it because I really like the look of bog oak and the fact that it could have been sitting somewhere for hundreds or thousands of years before it made it to the handle of my knife. So that's kind of why I get these in bog oak. I just like it. But you could probably get the plain version with just the bead blasted titanium and no inlays, and you could use this knife for years and years and years. I know people that have the 21s and they beat the mess out of those things and they still function perfectly. They take them apart, clean them, put them back together, right? So if I could only have one, I would get the large, just because of the additional utility from the additional reach of the blade and the, for me at least, better ergonomics in my hand. So I hope that well, I know that didn't make your decision for you, and I never set out to make your decision for you. I just kind of wanted to show you the knife, talk about why I ended up with both of them, and the purpose for both of these, right? The other thing is that if you're worried about spending that kind of money on this knife and that you might one day need to sell it, from what I can see, at least, the market is just going up and up. I see these knives going on the resale market. I've seen them in other countries and stuff for sale, like for $900 or more. And then I saw the same knife as this, except the blade was polished, and it was being sold for $830. So from what I can tell, these knives hold their value. I mean, that's subject to change, but right now at least, these knives really hold their value and could maybe be considered investments. I mean, I don't know. It depends on if that's why you're getting it as an investment, maybe. But if you're getting it for a really awesome knife that's probably perfect or darn near perfect, there are some problems. I mean, never gonna not. This clip isn't great. I mean, it is, but it's good. Other than that, this knife is darn near perfect, and you can use it and know that it can take pretty much any knife chores that you give it, right? Don't go prying staples out of a fence with it. I've handed other knives to people. They're like, hey, let me hold your knife, and I hand them the knife, and the next thing I look over there and they're prying a staple out of a 2x4. Whoa, right? So I wouldn't hand this knife to somebody that's going to do a task like that with it. But for any knife chores, skin and game even, right? And all kinds of other EDC things, this is probably the perfect knife. So I don't know if I helped or hurt your decision. If you're one of those folks that is on the fence about whether or not you want to spend this kind of money on a knife, but I ended up with both of them, and I'm going to carry them each for different reasons. And for the next, I don't know, until the bug bites me to buy something else, at least, these are going to be the two knives that are predominantly in my pocket in my collection for a while. So if you like this kind of content where I'm not trying to sell you anything, and I'm not trying to tell you that for instance, I do a lot of pistol reviews, right? And my review is never going to tell you that you need the latest striker fired polymer handgun that looks just like all the other black striker fired polymer handguns out there on the market. I'm just basically going to give you my opinion on whatever I'm reviewing and what I use it for, and then you can completely make your decision. So if you like those kind of reviews or overviews, if you go ahead and subscribe to my channel, I'd really appreciate it, and I will see you on the next video. Thanks.